In this video, I want to walk you through how you can promote your podcast after those long hours preparing for the launch of it, only to realize that it could have gotten a lot more attention than it deserved coming up. What's going on, everybody? My name is Karim Mustafa. I am co-founder and CEO of Tribe Tactics. And in this video, I basically want to help give you some ideas that could help give you some inspiration on how best you can promote your podcast once your episodes are done. So here's the thing, like, first of all, podcasts are long form assets. It's a different kind of beast altogether when it comes to promoting it, because by promoting, we're assuming that you want that to equate into downloads. You want people to actually see the posts that you make and actually listen to the podcast or watch the podcast if they're video podcasts as such. And what are the chances, right, that you find somebody who has the time of day to be able to spend, let's say, 30, 45, up to an hour, sometimes even more than an hour listening to your podcast, especially if you don't really have a brand just yet. We've definitely been there, and I wanted to share with you some of the things that we've learned, and hopefully it could give you guys some value as well. So the first thing I want to do is just jump into my trusty Zen Pen notepad over here. This is an awesome tool, by the way, definitely recommend it. But in terms of promoting your podcast, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. So if you do a quick Google search on like how to promote your podcast, there's a ton of stuff that you will find. Today, I want to walk you through some things that you may or may not have come across before, that are just a lot more, I think, holistic in terms of really thinking about what you want to do. So the first thing might disappoint you. It's be patient, right? Here's the thing, like, people don't notice something the first time you do it, because it's easier than ever to start something these days. It's very easy to buy a website. It's very easy to go to GoDaddy.com and get a domain. It's very easy, yes, to start a podcast, right? There's so many amazing platforms that help you get started right away with just like a smartphone or two smartphones, and going up from there. You really need to keep showing up time and time again and really be consistent to really become seen and to really, have your podcast mean something and really become a household name. I mean, think of, or at least a household name for your specific industry, which is ultimately what you're looking for, your specific industry, your specific area of passion. If you think of speaking of household names, if you think of all the household brands that, you and I would know, like, Coca-Cola or, Nike or Adidas, like, pick your favorite brand. I bet you these brands would have never been that top of mind if they didn't consistently, make it a point to actually show up in front of you as much as possible. And of course, it came with a ton of patience as well. Patience is not a synonym for laziness. It just means you keep doing what you're doing, but ultimately you have to be patient and consistent while you actually promote this show. So this is just a general thought to keep in mind as you go about planning to promote your podcast as such. The next thing you can do is look at creating snippets. So as mentioned earlier, there's a lot of different things that people see on their feeds, right? When it comes to looking at, all the different content assets that people can consume, there's a lot of like micro content, bite-sized content, video, audio, image written, and a long form asset isn't necessarily the first thing that people will rush to, especially if they haven't heard of this person before. Like, it really is a time investment as such. One quick way that you could really get the best of both worlds is to find clever ways to actually clip and snip and chop your podcasts into smaller snippets, because the same way that we decide to invest right, like 2 hours of our time to go watch a brand new cinema movie that maybe we've never seen before, that we, by definition haven't seen before, and we do all that based on watching a trailer. The exact same logic holds for our podcast. Sometimes you may come up with a really slick clip or something that's really insightful or something that's really unexpected, and it just makes people feel like, oh damn, like that really struck a chord with me. You know what? I never heard of these guys, but I definitely want to tune in. This is in terms of promoting our podcast to people who haven't seen you before, which, for the majority of us, if we're starting out, that's the space that naturally we're in. Creating snippets is a great way to not sacrifice the long form asset, because that will always be there. And yet, in the same time, you get to play ball, right, on the same level as those who are creating a lot of like quick like micro content and things like that. The only difference is that if you, let's say you create like 5 to 10 different assets from that longer piece, they're all essentially, the compound effect really kicks in because everything is all pulling back to that same asset. Or if you're a business promoting your podcast, all this content will eventually pull back to your website or back to your brand, so to speak. So creating snippets is something that you could think of doing to promote your podcast. And, the four formats, right, are video, audio in this case would be audiograms, image, and written. So some examples of video snippets would be just like a 1 minute clip that you could put up on Instagram, that you could put up on YouTube, on LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever channels are relevant to you, and then based on the channel, once again, you can decide if these are going to be like square videos or horizontal videos or perhaps vertical videos, and based on that, you could really start to create a lot of different assets based off of the one podcast, so to speak. And you could really build yourself a process where you essentially do this for every episode that comes out. If anything, it could actually help with the promoting of the content, as we'll talk about with guests in just a second. It could really help out with the promoting of that content and the promoting of the show overall in terms of inviting more guests onto it, because you can position it as like, hey, this is part of a package. Like when you come onto the show, we're not just going to publish an episode. This is going to be like, it's going to be an episode, and it's going to be like another 5 videos, maybe like 2 audiograms, like 2 image quotes of something that they may have said, a written summary. All of a sudden, you're really bulking up the podcast, both to have people come onto the show, but also to promote it, because you have all these assets that once again are pouring to the one long episode as that call to action. So the third thing then would be looking at co-promoting this, right? So co-promoting this with guests. So when you bring, this is assuming that you have a podcast where the format allows or perhaps is built on having guests onto that actual show. When you're doing so, make sure that you set the expectation early on that like, hey, we want as many people to see the conversations and the things that we talked about. So we're going to do a deal that when we publish this, you're going to do your part, we're going to do our part, and we're going to, let's say you, for example, you're going to create all that content, the snippets especially, and really have a plan where you're going to share that content, but also the guest is going to share that. If you're in B2B or if you're a company inviting another company onto your show, you can take this a step further and actually get in touch, be asked to get put in touch with the marketing team over there, and really make it a program, make it like, take it seriously, and realize that they are getting a lot of benefit by being on your show, and naturally they'll be only too happy to share that content on to their own networks as well. So when you really combine creating snippets with the co-promotion piece with guests, you really start to really see a lot of things work in motion in that regard. And for every episode, you don't have to get it perfect from day one. I mean, if anything, it's actually a lot more relatable, and in a weird way, it's actually very appealing when people can see that things are not like perfect from like day one, and that you're actually getting better as you go. That's very reminiscent of a lot of us, and I think everyone, so even if you don't have the perfect combination of snippets figured out at the start, don't worry, you can create so many different alternatives and see which one works best. For example, for one episode, you could do no snippets and see how far you get. And it's like, perfect, that's a benchmark. For the second episode, I'm going to do, let's say, just one small video snippet. And you can very quickly like Google like different tools that could help you with doing things like that. Next time you're like, okay, I'm going to actually try, an image quote, or maybe 2 or 3 image quotes, and really see what is the perfect mix that resonates best with your audience. Sometimes it could be just one and you just double down on that. And other times it could be a medley of all of them, right? But the fact that you have these 4 options available to you gives you plenty of ways to really promote your podcast by way of creating these smaller snippets, and by way of having a partner in crime to promote that content with you. These are 2 things that could really save you a ton of money, versus, for example, like sponsoring and paying for advertising behind every single episode that goes out. especially if resources are tight at the start. Both of these things are completely free to do. So hopefully that was helpful. Let us know what you thought in the comments, and if we, or rather, if you have any ideas on things that we can go into a bit deeper, or any other questions that we can answer in the future, please do let us know, because that's how we get ideas for future videos. All right. Hope you're having a great day, and chat to you soon.